The 1910s, aprons, war rations, and a lot of gelatin. If you thought making dinner was tough, try doing it while rationing sugar, pretending Spam is gourmet, and dodging advice from your mother-in-law who survived on pickled everything. Homemaking in the 1910s meant juggling corsets, causas, and casseroles, with a side of gelatin molded into shapes never intended by nature. Tea, toast, and 10,000 ways to gel a soup. The 1910s was the decade when skirts got slightly shorter, suffragettes got slightly louder, hallelujah, and homemakers got really, really creative with food that wobbled. This was an era where you could win a neighbor's admiration, a husband's loyalty, and the church picnic ribbon, all with a well-molded tomato aspic and a perfectly balanced deviled egg. When hats were big and butter was a love language. Ah, the 1910s. A decade sandwiched between corsets and chaos. On the one hand, women were still politely fainting into doilies. On the other, they were starting to question why they couldn't vote or wear pants without causing a societal collapse. Homemaking in the 1910s was part etiquette, part elbow grease, and entirely driven by butter, gelatin, and a profound fear of running out of linen napkins. The kitchen was the command center. The parlor was for impressing the neighbors, and the pantry was so well stocked, it could probably get you through an entire world war, which coincidentally would show up around 1914. Let's be clear. Domestic life wasn't for the faint of heart. The vacuum cleaner had just become a thing, but it looked more like a medieval torture device than something you'd want to drag across your parlor rug. And yet, somehow, women managed to keep house, raise children, make 3 meals a day from scratch, and still have the time to starch a collar so stiff it could cut glass. Decorating, think lace and wood. Curtains were made at home, usually from fabric that had once been a tablecloth. Lace doilies covered every surface, including the cat if it sat still long enough. Walls featured portraits of solemn ancestors and framed sayings like cleanliness is next to godliness. A phrase that felt less like a suggestion and more like a passive-aggressive threat. Electricity was still tiptoeing its way into homes, but homemakers were not waiting around for fancy gadgets. Oh no. They were conquering domesticity with wooden spoons, ice boxes, and enough elbow grease to fuel a steam engine. While the world was preparing for war, the women at home were preparing 3-course luncheons like their social standing depended on it, because honestly, it kind of did. The homemaker would own at least one respectable hat for the market and for spying on the neighbors when walking down the street. And to wear in the kitchen and for her housework, she had a lace-trimmed apron stained with character and rhubarb juice. A gelatin mold passed down from grandma, and slightly haunted, hung proudly on her kitchen wall. Her recipe box contained handwritten recipe cards, some legible, some coded in 19th century cursive, and ready to hand down to the next generation. A typical day in the life of a 1910s homemaker. I would wake up before the rooster, bake biscuits, warm milk, and churn butter because the store-bought kind was for amateurs or city folk. I would then scrub floors on my hands and knees. The mop was still in the concept stage. Your knees? Permanently scuffed, like badges of honor. And then I would host a women's luncheon. Jellied consommé with lemon? Check. Celery salad with apples and walnuts? Naturally. Look impressed when a guest brings a cheese wafer doused in way too much cayenne. Try not to cry from the spice. Let's take a peek at what might have graced the table at a fashionable 1910s luncheon. Your perfect 1910s luncheon menu, guaranteed to impress even the church ladies. The main course was creamed chicken on toast points. The phrase toast points might sound fancy, but it's just code for cut the crusts off so it looks dainty. Cream chicken was the queen of luncheon dishes. Rich, savory, and best served with just enough poise to distract from the fact that it's basically gravy. Gellied consommé with lemon. It was elegant. It was refined. It was soup, but set like a dessert. This dish mystified many and thrilled the brave. Shimmering like a topaz gemstone and flavored like broth, this was the statement piece of your table. Nothing said I'm cultured like meat-flavored jello. Serve it cold and with great confidence. If you act like it's normal, no one will question it, not even themselves. The menu continues with a celery salad with apples and walnuts. Because raw celery needed a purpose in life. Combine it with apples and walnuts, douse it in mayonnaise, and you've got yourself a crunchy contradiction that somehow became a classic. Serve it in individual lettuce cups if you're feeling extra fancy, and garnish with a maraschino cherry if you're feeling bold. Cheese wafers with cayenne. These little crackers packed more heat than Aunt Millie's temper during Bridge Club. They were small, spicy, and shockingly addictive. Made with sharp cheddar and a pinch of cayenne pepper, they paired beautifully with awkward silences and uncomfortable small talk. Deviled eggs with paprika and mustard. Deviled eggs were practically their own food group in the 1910s. A little yolk, a dollop of mustard, a lot of sass, just like the women who made them. A tip for presentation is to sprinkle paprika with flair, not fear. Uneven coverage is charming. Then dessert. A rhubarb pie with lattice crust. Rhubarb. The vegetable pretending to be a fruit, dressed in sugar and wrapped in a crust of dreams. The lattice top was more than just pastry. It was art. If your weave was tight and golden brown, you were basically the Michelangelo of the Midwest. Bonus points if you could cut it without collapsing the entire structure. Only one dessert? That just wouldn't do. I also served angel food cake with whipped cream, light as air and sweet as a summer breeze. Angel food cake was the 1910s equivalent of saying, "Look, I care enough about you to separate 12 eggs and whip the whites by hand." Serve it with whipped cream and fresh berries. Or just proudly explain to your guests how long you beat it with a rotary beater while the baby cried. And to drink, mint lemonade. Cooling, refreshing, and an excuse to pick weeds from your garden and pretend they're herbs. And I'd serve hot tea with rose petals. You heard right. Rose petals. Float them in your tea and call it a floral infusion while secretly wondering if you should be charging admission for this level of elegance. So there you have it, the 1910s, when women wore gloves to luncheon and boiled chickens on purpose, when food jiggled, gelatin ruled, and tea sandwiches were a way of life. Behind every stylish table was a homemaker armed with rolling pins, hairpins, and the quiet power of a woman who could fold a napkin into a swan while quoting Emily Post. And then she would serve her family what she called survive dinner, or aka leftovers from her luncheon. My family didn't mind. They loved the cream chicken on toast points and rhubarb pie with its beautiful lattice crust. Homemaking in the 1910s was about more than dusting the parlor and serving tea. It was about refinement, presentation, shaping mayonnaise into decorative towers, and casually serving a salad inside a ring of jello while pretending it was a normal thing to do. The 1910s homemaker was the original multitasker. She could entertain a dozen women in hats the size of small yachts, polish silver with vinegar, and make a meal that jiggled in 5 different colors, all while maintaining her posture and dignity. She was tough, resourceful, and probably had biceps from wringing out laundry that could rival a blacksmith's. And yet, she did it all with a smile, a starch-stiff apron, and the ability to say, "Bless your heart," without sounding like an insult. Most of the time. All of the recipes are provided in the description. Which one will you try first? Ready to enter the jazzier chaos of the 1920s? Bring your pearls and a bottle of something medicinal. It's about to get sparkly.